The real way to get rid of guilt and shame is to fully confess, to say, okay, this is wrong. I've done something bad. I need to change. Not only what I did was wrong, I was wrong. Because if I was not wrong, I would not have done this.
But we don't think that way because we are built from our brains is survival, right? And so we're going to do anything that we can think of to survive. And it doesn't matter if it's letting go of this or that or having financial problems or whatever somebody runs through before they ultimately end up in bankruptcy. But that's the last thing they do. And when you look at that one example, done it sooner, but they didn't because they were afraid.
Stretch yourself and find people who are also growth-minded and spend the majority of time with people who are growth-minded. At least people who don't hold you back. That's where clarity comes in. We have to have a clear vision about where we want to be, who we want to be, what our goals are, what our values are, and that we associate and align ourselves with people who share and support our vision.
Welcome to Inside Personal Growth Podcast. Deep dive with us as we unlock the secrets to personal development, empowering you to thrive. Here, growth isn't just a goal, it's a journey. Tune in, transform, and take your life to the next level by listening to just one of our podcasts. Well, welcome back to Inside Personal Growth and this episode. Joining me, and can you remind me, Reinhard, exactly where you are, what city?
In Worcester, Ohio. That's about an hour south of Cleveland.
Okay. So is Reinhard Klein, K-L-E-T-T, Clit, and he has a book that he's going to be talking, and I want to let everybody know also about your website. It's Carried on Eagle's Wings, is the website. And you will definitely want to go visit that website because there you're going to learn about the speaker's page, more about his book, Letting Go Saved My Life, how letting go can help you grow, which we're going to be speaking about, his services and testimonials, and the way to actually contact Reinhard. So Reinhard, thank you for being on Inside Personal Growth.
It's a pleasure. It's an honor. Thank you.
Well, it is for me as well, because you have a story that actually, as we said, spiritually, somebody intervened in your life very early on for you to even still be here. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been. So I'm going to let the listeners know a little bit about you. He is a dynamic keynote speaker, a best-selling author, and certified high-performance coach whose powerful story of resilience and transformation inspires audiences worldwide. With extensive public speaking experience and a TEDx talk, which we'll put a link to that TEDx talk, and numerous keynotes engagements, Reinhard captivates audiences with his unique blend of authenticity, expertise, and heartfelt connection, and I must add, story, because his story is very important. His work spans the globe, a dedicated student of the Bible. Reinhard integrates his timeless principles into the coaching and speaking. And as I said, his second book, Coached by the Bible, equips readers to navigate life's challenges with wisdom and purpose. Reinhard's journey has been a special one. Insights with passion leave audiences motivated to take courage steps toward their best lives. And we hope today to do the same thing with this audience, is to give you the courage for that. Now, Reinhard, not everybody knows this story because they don't have your book, and it's always important to kind of start off with where it was. You had mentioned in a previous podcast with somebody that the time you lived in Pasadena and you were a student pilot. And the book starts off with this harrowing experience as a student pilot. How'd that moment redefine your outlook on life and the power of really letting go? I mean, the whole book has a picture of a plane, a little Cessna. that you were basically crafting at the time. Tell us the story and tell us when you got back on the ground what the message was from God.
Yeah. Just to put it in a nutshell, I was on my third solo flight as a student pilot, and I had to practice approach to landing stall recovery. You know, when you're close to the ground, when you're in the landing process, then you're close to the ground, and you must make sure that you can't make any mistakes. Otherwise, you'll hit the ground really hard. You can't stall the plane at that time. So you practice that and get a feel for it at a high altitude where it's safe, where you still have some room for recovery. So I flew over from a nice airport to Simi Valley and started to practice that at 2,500 feet. What happened is I slowed down the plane to provoke the stall and then practice a recovery. But what happened is I dropped the left wing before I dropped the right wing, and I got into a what they call a graveyard spiral. So, I mean, my heart sank when that happened. I thought these were going to be the last few seconds of my life. And I was thinking about all kinds of things that I could do to get out of this, but nothing worked. I was thinking calling the tower or doing anything. I did not know what to do because it's not part of private pilot training on how to get out of a graveyard spiral. They deem it to be too dangerous. That's why they call it that. So, I was just going down. I mean, the instrument showed a very rapid descent, and the Earth was turning like a disc in front of me. I thought, these are the last few seconds of my life. So finally, after dropping 1,000 feet out of the sky, I realized I couldn't get out of it myself. I let go of all the controls and said, God, take this plane. And then in an instant, I came out of it. So I just pushed in the throttle to gain some altitude and flew back to Van Nuys Airport. I came out of the of the spiral at about 1,500 feet above the ground. Had I held on to the controls a few more seconds, I would have crashed the plane. I wouldn't be.
Yeah, it's a harrowing experience, and I think when you see the ground coming up that quickly, you said you were at 1,500 feet, you were at 2,500, so you fell 1,000 feet, and I'm sure, those seconds seemed like an eternity as the thing was going into its spiral. Is that the case?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was. I basically thought, okay, that's it. You know, my biggest fear was that my mother and my father would have to stand at the grave of another son. You know, so
Unfortunate.
so that was my biggest fear. I had lost two uncles in separate air crashes. And
Wow.
yeah, one in a glider and the other one in a helicopter, both as pilots. So my mother didn't even know at the time that I was taking flying lessons. They weren't.
Uh,
I didn't even tell them until
you
I got
probably
my
didn't you
license.
probably didn't want her to know. Um So look, look, this experience, it leaves an indelible imprint on your soul, obviously. And what is the biggest challenge you faced? One, you wanted to write a book about this. And how did the process of writing the book, because one thing was to have the experience, the second thing was to write about it and then to let other people know. But the third thing was really letting go of anything, personally. So when you're writing this book, you said, "Hey, well, I just let go of the controls." And the plane came out of it. Well, obviously, a huge message from God, the universe, whatever anybody wants to think. It was like, hey, if you let go, because if you hadn't have let go, you literally would have buried yourself. Um,
Right,
so,
right.
what's the biggest challenge you faced in writing the book, you would say?
Well, I guess the big challenge was I didn't see myself as a writer. In school when I wrote essays, I usually didn't get the best grades. Usually just got a C or so until I finally realized something, and then I started to get some Bs. But I just that wasn't my identity. I'm an engineer by trade, and that's the field I've worked in. But I realized that the message needed to go out, and the reason why I wanted to put it out, it was because one time I did a seminar And at the seminar, it was actually at a church retreat. And I just told the story in a little bit more detail and then asked people, what do you need to let go of in your life? And then they started to think. And there's some people raised their hands, and then I asked, so what is it that keeps you from letting go? And I saw people crying. And that's when I realized how much of an impact this story can have. And that's as I told the story to more people over the years, I realized all the kinds of different things that they needed to let go of, and the stories they told me of what they needed to let go of. And so that's prompted me to write then the book with 16 different chapters about different areas in life where people need to let go.
Yeah, very well done. So, why is it that you believe as a human species that men and women, we have so many struggles with what this is your first step is like letting go of control. Um, and what is the fear that you found almost everybody had of letting go? Like you in the plane holding on to the yoke, right? It must have been like, oh my gosh, well, okay, I know there's one more thing I could do. Take my hands off of it, right? And let it go. But we don't think that way because we are built um, from our brains is survival, right? And so we're going to do anything that we can think of to survive. And it doesn't matter if it's letting go of this or that or having financial problems or whatever somebody runs through before they ultimately end up in bankruptcy, but that's the last thing they do. And when you look at that one example, done it sooner, but they didn't because they were afraid.
That's right. And you mentioned it. You're right on. It is fear. You know, when you think about the wanting to be in total control is a form of fear.
Mhm.
You know, it's our lack of patience. And I find often that especially type A personalities, they want to control everything. And but they don't realize it's an illusion. There's so many things you cannot control. I mean, a typical example I find is sometimes when you're at the airport and a plane is delayed, and how some people get very impatient in controlling and try to grab the people, you know, the at the check-in counter, they grab them at their throat almost, and which accomplishes just the opposite, right? Because they don't realize, well, the unper the other person has the little people, so to speak, who they think are little people, sometimes have a lot more control than we realize, you know? One time, we were actually, late to a connecting flight, and, we walked up to the gate, and we were told, "Sorry, the plane is full, and, we are on a waiting list." And I just said, yeah, that's too bad." But, you know, explained a little bit the situation that we had a 1.5-year-old with us, and we ended up being the last 3 people to walk on the plane. We still made it, you know, because I was not trying to control the situation.
Right, and I think that's a very important lesson that you're talking about, and we talk about fear, worry, anxiety, Um, so many people today, because of the environment we're living in, they're uncertain. There's this
Yeah.
big uncertainty, and that, elevates the amount of anxiety that somebody has. What practical steps have you personally used and you've explored as a result of having this experience to release this fear, this anxiety, this doubt, this uncertainty, to move forward with, and as you say, faith and confidence? Because, look, faith is a word that people normally would say, well, I got to have a belief in something higher than me. There's got to be a power greater than myself. Confidence, a little bit different, but truly, both confidence and faith do come from us looking a lot of times beyond ourselves.
Totally. I mean, I totally agree. faith is combined with confidence, then that makes a huge difference. I would say faith even gives me confidence, because we all have a need in a way for confidence and for faith. And what I have found is that when people do not have confidence, they cover it up with the counterfeit of confidence, which is
Mhm.
pride.
Mhm.
You know, and a lot of times people think because of their pride, I can handle this, I can control this, I'm in charge, and I want to show everybody else that I'm in charge. When in reality, there's a lot of things that they are not in charge of. I remember a situation. I was on a business trip in China with some folks from General Motors. I was a sales engineer, and then the program manager actually for the General Motors account. And the buyer from General Motors, when we went to a local market to buy some souvenirs there in Nanjing, he thought because he was from this buyer, he was used to being able to put pressure on suppliers and so on. He represented this big company, but guess what? Those little people who tried to sell their souvenirs, they couldn't care less. It had no meaning to them at all. So he couldn't get any better price than the other people, and that kind of embarrassed him. Yeah.
Yeah, that is around pride. So, Reinhard, you were talking about pride, and I've always heard this said, um, ego is edging God out.
Mhm.
So ego, edging God out. I'm sure you've heard that. And look, our ego. Freud wrote extensively about it. Many people have written about it, and we know that in some cases it's there to protect us. Okay. Um, so could you share an experience where holding on to pride or being egoic held you back? And how did you overcome it? I mean, because it's a hard one. I mean, most people out there, when you grow up in life, the reason they don't know what's enough is because they've been told that they're not enough. Right? And this goes along with that. That's like, okay, I I didn't get straight A's in school, and my parents said, well, they wanted me to get straight A's, so I was less than. So they have this feeling of being less than. Then what happens with that is that becomes a spiral for, hey, well, my ego has to step in at this point to protect me from being that. Where did you find a place where you were able to overcome this and allow this letting go to just be without the anxiety, the fear, the ego, the everything?
Well, I guess I had one example when I look back, it was all about ego. Uh, I had a girlfriend for a while, and it wasn't going on for very long. But when she broke up with me, because we had some serious talks, I was already in my early 30s. I was really very upset, and especially when she started seeing a friend of mine that I introduced her to and so on, that made me very upset. And
You were jealous. You
I
were
was
jealous.
jealous. I
It was
was jealous.
jealousy. Yeah.
But, I didn't, I think it was my pride. My ego was hurt. What has he got that I don't got?
Right. Right.
And in hindsight, I mean, several years later, when I met my wife, and then actually a couple of years after I met my wife, we ran into her, and I saw her with her kids, and we were with our kids, and I was thinking, I'm so glad that never worked out, and and because, but in hindsight, it was really mostly ego. And
Mhm.
what had I let go of it more quickly, I would have, the pain. I thought it was pain. Well, it was pain, but it was a bruised ego. That's really what it was. And had I
Mhm.
let go of the ego sooner, I could have overcome much more quickly.
Yeah. Oh, most definitely. Now, one of the things that you talk about in the book is these. people, and we're just going to say all of us, we deal with guilt and shame from past mistakes. Oh, I shoulda, woulda, coulda. I wish I would have. They're living it through that, and they're shameful for it, or they're feeling guilty for it. What's the most powerful realization that helped you let go of any guilt that you were dealing with, so that you could move forward beyond it? My sense is that frequently uh, humans have, and many of us have a short memory. So what ends up happening is guilt comes back again, or that shame comes back again, as a result of an incident or experience. So how did you actually kind of move forward from it?
Um, the one thing is this, when we realize, unless, I mean, that's the biggest realization, unless guilt and shame serves as a catalyst for change, it serves no purpose. It serves nobody. It's something that happened in the past, and we can't change the past, no matter how hard we try. So, the real way to get rid of guilt and shame is to fully confess, to say, okay, this is wrong. I've done something bad. I need to change. Not only what I did was wrong, I was wrong. Because if I was not wrong, I would not have done this. So I need to change, and I need to confess without reservation, without blaming other people. So many times we say, I'm sorry. And then and say whatever we did wrong. And then, but we add the word but. And the word but negates everything we said before, because we are giving excuses for what we have done. But as long as we are giving excuses, we're not really releasing it completely.
Right,
you know
right.
so basically fully confessing, and then accepting mercy from God, mercy from other people, and also mercy for ourselves. We need to forgive ourselves, and also to understand the spiritual principle here about the significance of forgiveness. There was a doctor, an oncologist in Southern California that I read about a few years ago. I don't think he's around anymore, but um, he had all his patients. None of his patients died from cancer, and the first question he asked every single one of his patients was this: "Have you forgiven yourself, God, or other people? And if you can't forgive, I can't help you." So there's huge psychosomatic impact on not letting go of past guilt and shame.
Oh, and certainly, his approach, I don't know who he was, but I do know that in a book that I recently did an interview with Dr. Steve Bierman about healing beyond pills and potions.
Mhm.
They believe basically the same thing, in other words, to release that. But the other thing they recognize that makes a big difference on a patient not dying from the disease they have is the way in which the physician communicates with the patient.
Mm.
So if the patient, if they can say, hey, you only have, instead of saying you have a 98% chance of dying, how they word that, it says you have a 2% chance of living. And so what we're going to do is work with that. So refocusing on the positive versus the negative. And that brings me to this one, negative self-image, which is a theme in your book. You could even call this negative self-talk, because we have a little squirrel that runs around up in here, and it will come up with all this negative self-talk. I could have done it better. I should have done it better. What advice would you give someone who feels stuck in this kind of self-doubt and doesn't believe in their own potential? Where do you believe they can release and find relief and help?
Well, I think the first thing to realize is what neuroscience has taught us. The latest neuroscience has basically repeated what the Bible has said all along, that we are who we think we are, or we are a man, the way a man thinks, so is he. So
Mhm.
what we tell ourselves has a lot to do with what's going on. I can share a personal example. When I was in fifth grade, I had to take English as a foreign language, and I struggled with it. I struggled to even get a passing grade. My mother struggled with English when she was in school, and her teacher was my teacher. She was an old lady who had my mother already as a student, and she told me, "Well, your mother was never any good one you expect." You know? So, I in a way, I believed it, but then I
So
also
she reinforced what was going on with your mom,
exactly, she
unfortunately.
reinforced it. But here's the thing, because I always was very fascinated with travel and with America and visiting America and so on. And I realized that being able to speak English well would be very important for the rest of my life. No matter what career you pursue in this day and age, and that was back, in the 70s. Um, I saw the necessity to learn English well, and so that prompted me to really dig into it and to just practice. And said to myself, all these little English kids, they can speak English. Why can't I learn it? We limit ourselves, and there's actually neuroplasticity where we can grow the brain, where when
Right.
we're active, we can develop things that we didn't think we could. And so that really helped me. I mean, I went to England in my high school years every summer. I would listen to AFN, American Forces Network, back in Germany all the time, and read a lot of magazines and so on. By the time I went to finished high school, there was only one kid whose English was better, and he was one who spent a year in America as an exchange student. And so, you can overcome those things. You just have to be motivated and do not believe that you can't learn it. You may not learn it as fast as other people, but you can still learn it. You don't have to be limited by it.
It's so true. I mean, I've had many people on here, neuro scientists and doctors, and those neural pathways can be reprogrammed, right?
Right.
And the point is that for you to do that, you had this really strong desire because you had something, a purpose behind it, which I want to get to here. Um, you said that letting go of past relationships or jobs or organizations that people belong to can be difficult. How do you distinguish between, well, this is, you just talked about persisting versus letting go? There is a time when sometimes it's time to let go of a relationship. I know I went to my 50th class reunion. I couldn't kind of even remember who was there. But you look at some of those relationships and you see how some people have grown and some people have just stayed the same from when you were in high school. And you're like, well, how could this person after 50 years still be they they kind of seem the same, their mind hasn't grown, they haven't ventured out any further than that. So when do you, or how would you inform our audience of when to let go of those certain things so they can grow?
Yeah, what one important thing is to remember, and for your audience, they're all growth-minded people.
Right.
And we have come to the realization as growth minded people, we are a minority. That's just a fact. I mean, I had a friend I've known him for 40 years. When I got into coaching, he told me, now I want you to be aware that not everybody is going to be interested in personal growth. It has been his experience. He was a pastor for 40 years, but also a professional coach. And he said that only maybe 10% of people are even interested in it. And he said, I wish more people in the church would be interested, but that's just the reality, he said. And so just to accept that, and then find yourself, though, stretch yourself and find people who are also growth minded and spend the majority of time with people who are growth minded, at least people who don't hold you back. That's where clarity comes in. We have to have a
Mm.
clear vision about where we want to be, who we want to be, what our goals are, what our values are, and that we associate and align ourselves with people who share and support our vision. And
I
not,
I I
yeah.
totally concur with that. I mean, there was always this saying that, and I'm sure you've heard it. I don't want to paraphrase because I'm not going to paraphrase, but you're only as good as the 5 or 6 people that you hang around most of the time. So whether it be your friends or associates or whatever, and you should choose those friends very carefully. It's like the mastermind group that Napoleon Hill talked about. It's like who is in that mastermind group of people. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about is this, and it was one of the most unexpected chapters in your books. It's about letting go of stuff.
Mm.
Um, you know, people try and declutter. I had a guest on just not that long ago that said something that I'm sure you relate to because it's very spiritual in nature. He says, "Well, you never see a hearse with a U-Haul trailer behind it." Right? Meaning, think, hey, we're all gonna pass away. We're all gonna hopefully go to heaven. But the reality is that we're not taking any of this with us. So how does physical decluttering connect to emotional and spiritual well-being? Because I don't think a lot of people actually get that.
Well, I think it's an exercise of releasing things, when we hang on to things and don't keep stuff around, that often means we don't want to let go of the past.
Right.
And we have to ask ourselves, how is that serving me now? And it may not serve me now. And sometimes we have this scarcity mentality. We think, well, I may need it at sometime later. And but what we can do is when we let it go, we can also exercise generosity, for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, our son lived here for a while when he started his job, and then he moved to the West Coast to Seattle. And he had a set of snow tires that was almost brand new. And it was sitting in our garage. He doesn't need it in Seattle. There's no snow really,
Right.
So he didn't take them with him. And I said, well, they're just collecting dust. Why don't you sell them? Yeah, you're right. Just sell them. Now, shortly after I sold them, he decided that he may be coming back soon. You know, and so it would have been nice to still have them. But I said, don't worry about it. There was a couple that came from Ukraine and they had just lived here for a couple of years and they drove from Pennsylvania here to get these snow tires. They bought them for half price. Said you did a real service to these people. They were struggling financially. You gave them an opportunity to get this set of snow tires with wheels and rims and everything for half price. So he
Great,
felt good
great
about it.
story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he felt good about it.
You that does make you feel good that you were able to not 100% give something because you didn't just give it away, but actually give it to somebody at half price who really needed them. And your book is, and you're a very spiritual man, it's deeply rooted in faith. Um, and your relationship with God is really important to you. Um, how has your relationship with God influenced your ability to let go? Because the experience in Pasadena with the plan was definitely God was looking over you that day, and trust the process of life. Because there's also another thing I want to compliment you on. Normally, people, and I've noticed this about various cultures, when people I have, because I've been around a lot of German people, they really do get stuck, right? They have a hard time. And I just want to compliment you for your ability to have done what you've done, which is let go and be open and authentic and just be really true to yourself because that doesn't happen often, Reinhardt.
Thank you. Well, I guess one thing that really impacted me when um, I had this incident, when I got out of this spiral, it helped me to realize whenever I got into a difficult situation, even at work, and I had some German bosses too, some were good and others not so good. You got the gamut. I did generally hate to generalize, but I realized even at work when there was a crisis situation, a high stress situation, I told myself this: this is not a situation, this is not a matter of life and death that has to be resolved within the next few seconds. It helped me put things in perspective.
Right.
Um, and then also this the fact that there are things we simply cannot control. And that's where acceptance comes in. And I tell even my clients, I say, well, acceptance does not mean you like it. It doesn't mean
Mhm.
you approve of it. It doesn't mean you condone it. It doesn't mean you want to support it or it meets your values or any of that. Acceptance simply means it's outside of your control. You have no responsibility for it and you have no control over it. So let it go.
Great advice, and especially under the current circumstances that exist in our country. You know, there couldn't be more division or bifurcation as a result of, current administration and people for and against, and so much againstness. And, we don't see people like letting go of a lot of things. And some of this is in our control and some of it's not. That, like you say, it doesn't mean that we can't stop, people can't stop hearing our voice. They can.
Right.
Uh, and it's always good to be heard. So this question kind of would be our wrap up podcast question here. And, we've talked about a lot of things: letting go, guilt, negative self talk, all the things that you've covered during this book. But if you were to give someone out there listening today one or two bits of advice from the book that would actually change their life immediately. Because here's the thing, it's one thing to say, "Oh, I'm going to coach you and it's going to take you 6 months to get through this." But if you could give some, as a coach, give a couple bits of advice from your book that would really say, okay, if you implemented this today, you could make a change today
Mm.
and it would be for the positive.
Yeah.
And you could sustain this new habit for the rest of your life if you thought about it this way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think the number one thing, it's also a topic in the book, is this let go of grudges and bitterness. A lot of people struggle with forgiving somebody. Sometimes it's people who have caused them some trauma in their childhood. There's been abuse. There's all kinds of situations where people struggle to forgive. And we have to come to the realization again, we can't change the past. And when we forgive, it is something that we're doing for our own selves. You know, we are the main beneficiary when we forgive. We are not punishing another person by not forgiving them. We are punishing ourselves.
Mm.
As I said earlier, it can even kill us. Like the oncologist said, "Can you have you forgiven?" So holding on to grudges and bitterness is probably the worst thing that we can do. And again, it's just acceptance. And whether the other person repents, so to speak, or not, that's up to them. That's between them and God.
Mhm.
And whether we forgive them or not has nothing to do with whether God will forgive them or not. You know, Let Him deal with it. Whatever it is, He knows them better. He knows their hearts. He knows their minds. And many times, the people we don't forgive, they have moved on. They may even be dead,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
we are hurting ourselves. So that's the number one thing I think that we can just decide. I decide to not hold any grudges and bitterness. In moving forward, I can decide I'm refusing to be offended because that goes back
Right.
to the pride issue.
And that also is self-forgiveness, right?
Right,
So when you say forgiveness, it's one thing to forgive another person. It's another thing to do would be is self-forgiveness, forgive ourselves for
right.
what we did to the other person or what may have happened. Because there's a lot of incidences out there where people kind of move on and brush it under the carpet. But the reality is it takes self-forgiveness, right?
Right, right,
I recognize what I did. I'm sorry. I hope you understand. And even if you don't say it to their face, say it to yourself, right?
right, right. And the reason why it's important is if we have to think of it this way, I have to heal from within. And if I'm not healed emotionally and spiritually, then I can be of less service to other people. Just to give you an example, uh, my mother had dementia. She was in a nursing home in Germany, and she broke. She fell and broke her hip, and you know how it is with elderly people. We don't know whether she broke her hip first and then fell, or the other way around. But um, then I felt really bad, and called my one sister, and who told me, "Oh, mom was crying," and she said, "Why doesn't my son visit me?" You know. Uh, and then I talked to the other sister, and the other sister said, "You know, with her dementia, a couple of hours after you left, she would not have even she wouldn't even remember. So don't stress yourself about hopping on a plane now between Christmas and New Year's. You know, it's probably not going to work. Decided when she said, I'm missing my boy, I want to see my boy, that I decided I'll get a ticket in the summer when I could visit her for a couple of weeks, when I can plan it long term. And but then I already bought the ticket, but she passed away in February.
Mm.
Now I could beat myself up over this and say, "Oh, I should have visited mom one more time," and so on. But whom does that serve? And I know my mother would say, "I'd rather you spend your time and energy visiting some other elderly person in a nursing home than mourning about the fact that, you didn't see me anymore or feel guilty about it." Because
Well, the key is not feeling guilty about it.
not to
And
feel
and
guilty
I
about it,
and I think that's really important, Reinhardt, is because, a lot of people would carry that for a long time feeling guilty. I didn't see my mother, I didn't make it there on time. And that was God's plan. You don't have any control over that. We've all got an exit date and time. None of us really knows, right? And so I think you have to live every day to its fullest, and that's what you've done. Look at you've flown planes and you've experimented with coaching and you learned a new language and you've always been curious. I can tell that about you. And I really respect that in you as a coach. And I want to let my listeners know that to really learn more about him, Carried on Eagle's Wings is the website that you want to go to. That's CarrieDonEagles wings.com is where you want to go to. You'll find out more about his free 15-minute consultation. You can click a button there. He does corporate coaching as well. You can watch his TEDx video that he did at Purdue. You can learn more about the book. You can look at information about his 5 high performance habits. He's a certified high performance coach. So I really want to encourage my listeners, Reinhardt, to take a look at your website, to reach out to you. You can actually contact him. There's a little contact page there, but even an easy way is Reinhardt at carriedoneagleswings.com. So please reach out to him. I appreciate everybody listening to this podcast. Reinhardt, I appreciate you and everything that you've brought to the podcast today. All of your stories, your wisdom, your thoughts and ideas about truly how people, if they trust in a higher spirit, can let go, let God, and everything will work out. You have to have faith. You have to understand. You have to be confident in it. And I think that's something we all need to hear these days. Um, and I appreciate you bringing that message to the show this February the 11th, 2025. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Greg. It was a real pleasure. I always enjoy sharing this.
Well, God bless you. You have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
You too. Thanks, Greg.